It has been a while now that I was doing development for a German keyboard layout. And you see that this is a very complex idea actually when you get into it. It's also interesting. Most people that have nothing got to do with computer keyboards or keyboards think that this is something you get a patent at the end when you are clever and you have an alternative to the QWERTY or Quartz keyboard. So this is in English language, obviously not an English native speaker, and I don't use the keyboard as English writer or for English texts, but for German texts. And it's right away to say that all this discussion about how many keys do you need, there is, for example, in the internet, this kind of 34 keys is all you need, and then you can reduce this even furthermore, and so on. This is bullshit, because it's in the German language, as in other languages, you have more characters. You have the umlaute, and you have the, as we call scharfes S, the long S. So this creates a rather uncomfortable situation for everybody who is, for example, dealing with software like Vim or others that have to be compatible with the American or English layout. And these small shifts or the exchange between Z and Y, just for an example, is nerve-wracking and has always been a hassle. So the solutions we have today obviously work smoothly because QWERTZ and QWERTY, as it's called, a normal keyboard, can easily be used to write either German as English text. So the question is, why hassle? Why continue to deal with this? Well, okay, maybe it's a pastime, but the most often you see this kind of discussion that they say, well, the QWERTY keyboard is horrible and it's derived from the typewriter, and because of the technical, mechanical conditions of the typewriter, it has been done the way it is as we know it, and it's a locked-in system for our society, produced many millions and millions of keyboards, and nobody can actually get out of this. This is true for several reasons. And then you have the other discussion, and then if you look at the keyboard, whatever letters are printed on it, it's in a so-called staggered way arranged, so it's not that keys are one beyond the other in a matrix layout, but in a so-called ortholinear layout, whereas the normal keyboard or the typewriter keyboard is shifted horizontally. So we know that all, maybe you know that if you're interested in keyboards, you know that all very well. So let's go ahead. And the next thing is the ergonomics. So you say, well, look at the writing with your hand. You see that you have a pen in your hand, and is writing, and the left hand keeps the paper straight or moves the paper. So you have this kind of asymmetric work, if you're left-handed and left-handed, so on, which is strange to our body because we seem to be kind of symmetric, but we are only kind of symmetric, and we work asymmetrically. This is also an ergonomics problem or physiology, and you know, it can lead to tensions and asymmetric and problems. So if you go from the handwriting to the typewriter, you see that in the typewriter, only the right hand on a big bar makes the spaces, or the left. So you don't probably, I don't know people much, they use the left thumb to do this alternatively or something else. And the strong fingers, that's an argument, like the thumb on the left hand, for example, is really a spasmodic going up and doesn't do anything. So why not use it? Yes, that's another thing. It's not really ergonomic, it's also economic in a workflow. If you put all this together, you already get an idea that you have a split bar, a split spacebar if you want, and then you have fingers, and you go on with the ortholinear because it's you see this movement, and then all this kind of goes out and in, and you can do the middle row a little higher because the finger is longer and this one is shorter and this is more thing. So all this has been done, and you can always have this kinesis keyboard, which is in a mold, or the tactile keyboard, which goes very much to this different length of the fingers. But the normal keyboards more or less are on the same length, so it's like that. It's not a problem. We are very flexible. The problem that we know is in ergonomic that our hands don't do this. They don't like to do this. They work inwards or not outwards, and that's a problem. If the keyboard goes down, the problem is that the hands are more and more outwards. So this creates problems. So you have the split keyboard, and from advantage comes also disadvantage. For people who have split keyboards or have never used it, it's a nightmare. And especially if you have these two keyboards in separate pieces, they always shift and you have to rearrange them and spend a lot of time to rearrange actually your keyboard in a manner that is, and it has other problems, transport problems and connectivity problems and so on. Another thing is that this is very strange in the connection between hardware and software and the keyboard layout, and then the software, the application you use. So what I'm doing, I'm not coding, I'm not doing programming, I'm just writing German text. It's prose text, whatever. So this is like using a typewriter. The typewriter has been the model, and the typewriter still is the model, strangely enough, because the whole metaphor has changed with the digital possibilities. So the application in typewriter, obviously there is no application, and the application is has become also very predominant in many things. The worst example obviously is Word, and also everybody is using Word. Everybody thinks Word is maybe horrible, I don't know, but Word is horrible just for the reason because it's so big. So you can do everything with it. This was a strange idea that productivity comes with this big endless functionality. Obviously, there is also the counterbalance, and there's editors, and there are very intelligent editors, and so on, so on. Actually, software should disappear. That's what I want to say. Software shouldn't exist. It should just work. But how can you deal with this? So, if there is this discussion that you do few keys, how many keys actually do you need? You need the letters, you need the function. Well, and then you have the space bar, you have maybe a backspace or the delete bar, and so on. Then it gets fuzzy. It's very clear that you need all the letters, and some are more often, and some less often used, and some are really barely used, and so on. And in the German language, for example, is a very strange fact that the letter C, like in clay, yeah, the C letter, isn't used at all alone, but it's used nearly in every second word in combination with the H or this SCH. That's completely different to the English language, for example, and it's a completely different dynamic in writing. So you see some letters aren't used alone, but only in combination with others. Like you have also in English this TH thing and so, but this is very extreme in the German language. And a good layout has to take care of that. But then you see that you have all these letters you rarely use. Maybe you lose parentheses, or you lose guillemets, and you obviously lose the comma. And then the comma is very strange because the comma always has a space after it. The dot mostly has a space. It used to have two spaces actually, but now it has one space. Can discuss it. If you want to do two spaces, it's more obvious to find a dot at the end of a sentence. So this is software that stands in your way. And if you have a comma, you could really have a key, and you have the key and the comma, and that's it. Well, we approach something. So you have got an idea. Now, when it gets fuzzy, you can say, okay, these things that are less and less and less important, less often used. Well, stash them away in an attic, stash them away in a second layer. Yeah, So you can make layers and layers. It's always the same keys, and then you get another problem. How do you label these keys? It is important that not only you yourself, but also maybe other persons and people understand what is a key doing. If you print this button, what does it do? And I think this is a question of a good user interface, that everything is very clear and things are not double, not unnecessarily double. If you select a text, you can select a text with a mouse. Now we enter in another discussion. This is this kind of religious, quasi-religious flame wars, which have developed in text editors. The most famous, obviously, is the one between Vim using and Emacs using, these two big old Unix text editors, because one is modal, so to speak, permanent modal editor. When you do in Vim, you hit the escape button, you are in a different mode. You are in the command mode. You don't write text. To write the text, you have to press the button E, for example, or I or A, and then you're in the insert mode. In Emacs, it's the other way around, so to say. You're always in insert mode, and then if you press, for example, the control button, the letters become a different meaning, become commands. That's very obvious and very banal. And you see through the history, maybe in the beginning this wasn't very clear, and it has shifted more and more to this kind of Emacs mode. Also, Vim is very popular still. So actually both are modal, as we know, because one is permanent. You hit a key and you can, for example, in new keyboards have layers, and you can toggle on layers, and then they stay in the layer, and you hit again the layer button and you go back to the other layer, or you have to one-time shot, or you have to press the layer button, and then you are, until you press it, you are in the second layer. Well, okay, but if you have more layers, what do you print on the labels? It becomes either, it's nice to have a big letter and you say you print the letter A, that's a button A, and you print the key and that gives you the letter A. Wow. And the shift is already something strange, because you can say, wow, my keycaps have lowercase letters, or do they have uppercase letters? It's strange. You hit an A and you see a lowercase a, whereas it's printed an uppercase A. We're already in a slight layer of abstraction here. And it gets worse when you get a second layer. For example, you have a second layer and then a letter A becomes number one. Isn't that confusing? And if you do a shift on the one in the second layer, it becomes an exclamation mark. That's even worse. So you will have to print 3 or 4. A small, a lowercase a, uppercase layer, an exclamation mark, and a 1 on one little key. And if you go for a third layer, you run out of space on your little keycap. So, well, to say, well, I don't mind, I learned that I don't do any labeling on my keys at all. That's the best thing. Okay, no labels and nobody knows anything, where's what keys. And if you write every day 12 hours and you do that for 365 days, 365 days a year, well, you know maybe where are keys, until you change something or somebody else comes or something happens and you don't work for 2 weeks and you forget which layer, where was what, and this is really awkward. We're talking about here about mental load. So mental load, what is that? Most people speak about muscle memory. That's kind of the other way around of speaking the same thing. Muscle memory is you are a robot, and the robot inside you is writing, and until robot becomes disturbed, or he forgets something, it doesn't work anymore, especially if you have to change or you relearn because you reprogram some keys, then your robot comes out of his path, his working flow, and he starts to think. And when you start to think, then you have to stop to write, and you start to think about keys and not about what you actually wanted to say and write. So the mental load is that you deal with all these things which actually have absolutely nothing got to do with what you want to write. The software, the operating system, and key layers, and which key is what, and so on. So again, the question how many keys you need. Less is better in this way, but less is not the best. Less is not the best because you have the command keys, you have to do things. So now comes another chapter. This is the chapter about what I think how we can work on the computer and we cannot work on the typewriter. That is that you split your workflow into two things. The one is keep writing, this Hemingway kind of writing. Don't look back, you write and write. And if you gobble a word, you rewrite just the word you write. It's much faster than to do quick fixes and do backspacing and fiddling around while writing. Now keep on writing, keep on writing. So you need keep on writing. You need really hardly any interpunctions. Yeah, you need your letters. Yeah. Well, even in the German language, maybe you need 40 keys, whatever. You actually need a return button, a space button. You don't even need the backspace button. You don't need any movement buttons. And so on and so on. You can just write, and then you have the mouse. That's another flame war. Mouse in text editors, yes or no? Well, it's bullshit. Obviously, yes, because it's very handy and it's very intuitive, and you don't have to think again, how can I jump or how can I go to this and that letter, or phrase and paragraph and page and so on and so on and so on. That you can obviously, yes, in Vim move fairly quickly around, but this is still a completely mechanical way to move around and not intuitive. When you go, okay, what is the model? Not the typewriter. The model is the pen on your paper, because on the paper and you have the page. So this is another issue, your display. Now we got it all, okay? It's not only the hardware on your keyboard, it's also the display. What do you see? How much you see? What's the font look like? What's the size? What's the margin? How long is how many letters are displayed in one line, and so on. These kind of display, which is the heritage of the paper which you created before, is now created by the machine. So actually, there is, as I said, always a disadvantage to an advantage. If you do work like no break on a line and no at the end, no wrapping, so to say, then you have to wrap the text yourself, and it's kind of tedious because you have to do an extra movement in the typewriter. It was quite a heavy movement. Now you have to enter the enter key, the enter key, and you maybe don't want to watch actually when is it end. So automatic wrapping, yes, it folds the line, and maybe it should even stay like that. Less the text is moving, less the text is rearranged while working on it, better it is, because you learn very quickly. You learn the image of your page, you learn the image. And the next thing is that computers are not in page oriented, but they are kind of flowing up and down, and people have, I think, a mental load to find again the spot, because we are as beings very much oriented in topography. What we can do really great is orient ourselves in a three-dimensional space. But if the text is flowing up and down and it's no paper and so on, I think this is an extra mental load to always look for that spot where we have been, because we look somewhere and then is there something else. So the best thing obviously would be a page, like it was in the Xerox Alto. You see one page and it doesn't move. Yeah. The disadvantage obviously in that thing is, if you work like that, that's the keep writing and whatever shit happens, it's like that. So you need a second step, a second level, second round, so to speak. That's exactly what I want to say. It starts the revision process. Maybe the first revision process obviously is you reread it and you clear it of all the garbled words and the repetitions. So you need just one key. It's a delete key. You can delete words or you can delete characters. That's it. You delete even lines that have been garbled. That's it. You don't need anything else. And you need to rewrite maybe stuff, what comes to your mind, words or lines. So how do you do that if you cannot add anything? So you need actually a second stage software thing. In the first, everything stays as it is. In a second, you can have this kind of splicing and you make space. You can create new spaces, you make space, and you insert new text. Yeah, so we are not done yet. Now, so actually, if you need that, you need another key. You make the make space key, space and lines. 2 keys for the revision process. Another key maybe for the upper lower changing if you have made a mistake in a typo because it's low or it's a lowercase and should be uppercase and vice versa. Another keys, 3 keys, and maybe the twiddle if you have mixed instead of the and so on. That helps maybe, yeah, you hit a dedicated key and it swaps the 2 letters. 4 revision keys actually are enough, and you don't need actually a command key or a control sequence or whatever. I call them dedicated keys. That is easy. You write on the label what they do. Maybe you can even have a shift function, so to say in layers function. For this, for example, you have the delete key, and if you have a second layer delete key, you delete the word. Wow. And you don't even need the backspace key. You never do a backspace. You do the backspace maybe in a system, but you can live with the delete key. Mac thought they don't need the delete key and they have just a backspace key. Wow. So whatever where that comes from, maybe it's minimalist in the small keyboards. You reduce keys as possible, but yeah. So that's it. And now you enter the third. Obviously the third stage of your reworking process. That is when obviously all that garbled and inserted stuff and moved stuff has to be rearranged maybe in a more economic and legible layout. I want to add in here, as we are already heading towards the end, this short fast run through of short ideas, that for example this fantastic graph trough or run-off system, typesetting system from the 60s actually, of the Unix system, was great because you could work and give, for example, bold, italic, headlining, listing, footnotes, and all this stuff of academic writing with little, very simple commands. You just plain text, write a dot, and then a letter or 2 letters which indicate how that what is written afterwards should be displayed or printed. For example, I don't know, these are the macros. You print a dot at the beginning of the line, you print a B, for example, and that means dot is a command, attention. B means what follows should be printed bold, and everything that is written after that is bold. And then next line you can do dot R, for example, and it's regular again. Or maybe you don't even need to write something. When you hit an enter, maybe it stops the command, whatever. So it's obviously a little hard to read, but you don't have to fiddle around with making a proper nice page, because the page will be then calculated for the PDF. That is maybe good for academic writing. If you do fiction, you just need to reflow the text. And there is markdown language and other things you can do with plain text writing. That is also very easy. Yeah. So 23 minutes and 23 seconds. Bye.